You know, I used to be a proud feminist. Back when the movement was all about, yeah, we sent the first woman to space! We can have checking accounts now! We can own our own businesses! But now the entire feminist movement seems to just be, men bad! All men are bad, they don't deserve nice things! If you're a woman who still likes men, you're bad! And I don't find it productive. It's just, these days, people who claim to be feminists say and do things that just kind of make me go, ugh. And in my heart, I do still carry the ideals that original feminism was supposed to always carry, which is that men and women should have equal opportunities. That's why, as impassioned as I am about making sure that I see women succeed, setting a great example for my daughter, and making sure that we address women's struggles, I didn't just stop at women. I continued on to see what men are struggling with as well, which is a large part of how I became the Dadvocate. Because I'm able to recognize that women benefit the most as well when men's struggles are also addressed. We can't leave either 50% of the population in the dirt. But nonetheless, every single day of my life, I am absolutely inundated by some of the most harmful, toxic, ridiculous, quote-unquote feminist propaganda that I have ever seen, at least until the next day. Today, I'm going to introduce you to one creator who truly embodies this toxic feminist spirit. Perhaps one of the most unhinged feminist writers I have come across thus far, and why it's absolutely shooting its own movement in the foot. Today we're talking about a creator named Zh Villainis. Zawn is a feminist writer focusing on motherhood, marriage, and household inequality, which you will soon see is just another way of saying men bad! I first stumbled upon Zawn's page through this post. It reads, "How every misogynistic tribute to dads goes. Here's to dads. They have jobs. Wow, so amazing working a job. Here's to dads. They use their jobs to pay for things that sometimes people don't appreciate. Heartbreaking. Trauma. Men suffer so. No, women don't have jobs. No, women don't suffer when people don't appreciate the things they work for. Shut up. Dads. Here's to dads. Here's to dads. Sometimes they yell because having a job is very sad and very heartbreaking. Dads. Dads exist. Dads have jobs. Dads are amazing for existing and having jobs. This one dad one time changed a diaper after his job. Protect this man at all costs. No, we're not talking about moms. Don't be selfish. This post is for dads. Women who want praise are entitled monsters. Men bad! I don't think I've ever seen a tribute to dads that went quite like that. It seems very, bitter, a little bitter. And I also find it very ironic that she complains that any posts that happens to be someone appreciating dads doesn't include moms enough when, listen, I have never seen a Mother's Day post that a dad tried to hijack and make all about him, but I have seen plenty of Father's Day posts from women who are like, Happy Father's Day to me because I basically play both roles. And look, I completely understand that not every single dad is great, not every single man is great, but neither is painting every single one of them with the most hateful, bad faith paintbrush that you can possibly get your hands on. It's not even possible that he actually is incredibly helpful and gifted and makes your lives better outside of just having a job or changing a diaper one time. The comment section is equally depressing and full of women who hate their husbands quite publicly. It's so hard to be a dad. The women used to pamper him, feed him, serve him, put him first. Then the child was born. The woman takes care of the child. How neglectful. The woman prioritizes the child. How rude. The man cannot be blamed for sulking, for yelling, for cheating. Here's to dads who do the bare minimum for their kids and still don't recognize when their daughter needs new socks, underwear, shoes, and school clothes. Pretty much, my husband uses his job an excuse for literally everything. What's that thing the women always say? May a love like this never find me. So I decided to leave a comment, and all I did was ask a very simple question. I asked, how is it inherently misogynistic to show gratitude for your husband and father of your children? Instead of engaging in any kind of good faith discussion, They blocked me. Now, I'll admit, whenever I comment from my page, the Dadvocate, on just about anything, it often shows up in other people's timelines. So once I commented, there were a lot of other fathers who started kind of piling on into the discussion and also adding similar criticisms that I did. A lot of these comments being from other pro-father groups. Shortly after, Zawn limited their comments. But what I noticed is that very shortly after that entire interaction, Zawn immediately published this post claiming that she was now doing a deep dive into fathers' rights groups. She writes, "If you believe the dominant narrative, men are suffering. Feminism has gone too far, and fathers suffer the most because family courts favor women. Anyone who has looked at the evidence knows none of this is true. Still, fathers' rights groups appeal to our belief in fairness as 50-50 rather than fairness as equity. They draw upon deeply held implicit beliefs about mothers and fathers, about the purpose of marriage, and about the needs of children. In spite of their reactionary, often unhinged proclamations, they have been remarkably efficient at getting men undeserved privileges in family courts." Pause, because national data actually shows us that the average father only gets 35% parenting time throughout the entire year. You don't even think 35% of the year is deserved? When we know that the national epidemic of fatherlessness, children living in homes without their father or adequate time that they get to spend with their father, leads to an enormous spike in incarcerations, dropping out of school, mental health crises, self-esteem issues. You don't think children deserve time with their fathers? It's now routine for men who never spent substantial time with their children, and even for objectively abusive men to get significant custody, including 50-50 or more. How has this happened? Fathers' rights groups have lobbied hard to depict divorcing women as crazy monsters. In this framing, women are completely irrational, unreliable, and most importantly, stunningly abusive. It flies in the face of everything we know about women and men. Every woman has a scary story about a monstrous man, but how many women have you known who are sociopathic and irrational monsters? None? One? We're already starting to see a pattern of projection, right? So far, Zawn has been the one to paint men as a monolith of irrational, unhinged, sociopathic, abusive monsters. Honestly, I don't really see that from most fathers' rights groups. Are there always going to be some bad apples that fall from the tree? Yes, absolutely. But I would say that most of these groups are simply fighting for equal shared parenting because both parents are fit and not abusive, and that almost all of the legislation that I have seen pushing for shared parenting has expert level guardrails against anybody abusive having custody of the children. It's also so weird and dangerous to downplay any potential of a female perpetrator of abuse by insinuating that most of us have never, ever been harmed by a woman at all. And if we have, it must have been like, one time, right? I would be astonished if any one of you watching right now hasn't been harmed by a woman, at least at some point in your life. Now, does that make it okay to paint all women with a broad brush of all of them being terrible monsters? No. Not at all. And as someone who still holds feminist ideals, I find it equally wrong to say the same thing about men. Nonetheless, she continues, "Repeat a lie long enough, though, and it becomes the truth. We must understand how these groups function as cults, programming men to believe utter nonsense. Yes, utter nonsense, like that they deserve any equitable, meaningful relationships with their children if they dare separate from the mother, even if the mother was cheating on them, or stealing from them, or in active addiction, or a terrible person. No, it's the men. The men are always at fault. We must do this if we are to ever have any hope of stopping them." I decided to wade into the world of fathers' rights groups. I followed them on social media, read hundreds of posts, and reviewed enough blogs and attorney web pages to make just about anyone vomit. here's what I've learned about their beliefs. Now, mind you, this was posted 22 hours ago, which was very, very, very shortly after this entire shenaniganry went down. I left my comment, a very simple question, and she immediately received some interaction from pro-fathers pages. And then, within just a few short hours, she's suddenly infiltrated all of these fathers' rights groups, read hundreds of posts and hundreds of web pages. Now, maybe she was already coincidentally diving down the rabbit hole of fathers' rights pages. It's possible, but based on what you're about to see from this blog and others, I'm gonna just call bullshit. Again, keep the whole projection thing in mind as she tries to paint fathers' rights groups as the one that paints all women as crazy monsters instead of looking inward at their own. I also just want to preface this by being very fair and charitable and saying there are some issues with a lot of fathers' rights groups. Just like feminism, a lot of them have gotten a little too radical and a little too extreme. And when I first started my advocacy, I did use the association fathers' rights with my page, but since then, just like with feminism, I've actually moved away from it because of a lot of the negative connotations it does carry. The main reason being that I didn't want to take away any attention from the source and the root cause of my advocacy being the children. I didn't want people to think that I was more pro-father than pro-mother. While I recognize that fathers are disproportionately affected by becoming non-custodial for several reasons, I also recognize that mothers are very damaged by family court systems as well. So my advocacy for this reform is really to hit from all angles, not just for fathers. And I have seen some fathers' rights groups, as I said, become a little bit too radical, a little bit too extreme, and I have seen some of them speak down on women. That said, I think it's going to be really interesting when we go down this rabbit hole and examine the phenomenon of the projection going on here and how alike the radical groups that she is criticizing are to her own radical group. Her blog post reads, "She's just a crazy monster. What I've learned from following fathers' rights groups." We read this part, so I decided to skip down and see the next area, where things, get crazy. The missing reason. Esendai originally coined the term the missing reason to refer to estranged parents who refuse to acknowledge their children's pain. These parents refuse to listen to their children's concerns and pretend that the reason for the estrangement is missing, when it's really just the reason the parents don't want to listen to or acknowledge. The same dynamic is at play in men's rights groups. Here, all women are quote-unquote crazy and leave for no reason. And again, we discussed this. There is this common myth that pages like Zawn and other radical feminists push, which is that it's always women leaving the men. The reason for a breakup can never be the woman's fault or responsibility in any way. Men bad! Women not bad! Men bad! That's the common theme we see here. But we know for a fact that plenty of men leave women because they were cheated on, stolen from, abused domestically, physically, verbally, or had to endure the onslaught of a woman engaging in active addiction. Yet Zawn continues, which is strange given that the data shows that rates of violence in marriage are sky high, that most men exploit their partners, and that marriage is an awful deal for women. Now you might be thinking, source? Source, please, ma'am? Don't worry, it's a good thing these are clickable links so that we can see the source. You ready for this? Oh, the source is Zawn's own personally collected surveys. Well, that's convenient. Well, surely Zawn would not mislead us. Surely these surveys that she's conducting must be peer-reviewed, include control groups, pass through some kind of legitimate resource, right? Right? Let's start by looking at this one. Results of my survey of women criminally victimized by men. All right, so we've got some blog drudgery. She shares her thoughts. Women are the victims of crime. Okay, I wanted to know what happens to women when a man commits a crime against them. This data, the product of dozens of hours of work, is the product of my research. Now just remember that framing. It's going to come up a lot. She's going to use it to credential her studies. As long as she says, I did dozens of hours of work on this, it makes it totally valid. But what's this? It, along with the results of all of my other surveys, as well as 8 extra posts a week and hundreds of thousands of words of content, is available to anyone who would pay to support this work. So this very important data about how women are criminally victimized by men is behind a paywall. So this sounds like it's pretty important information, things that you really need women to know and understand so that they can protect themselves, so that they can share these important studies with other women, but they have to pay you to see it. To me, that feels like a bit predatory. It feels like you are fear-mongering your audience in order to give you money, please. That's what it feels like to me. Maybe we'll find something that's not behind a paywall, though. Let's click on this one. Is abuse the normal state of heterosexual relationships? Because that one seems to align with her claim that almost every man exploits every woman he's with. Bold claim, but I'm sure she's got something to back it up. Her survey, after all, says yes. It's so much worse than people realize. Wow, okay, show me what's up, Zawn. What are relationships with men actually like for women? No one seems to know. What? What do you mean no one seems to know? Men and women have been having relationships forever? That since the dawn of time? But none of us know? None of us know what it's like? Okay. And very few people seem to care. None of us care at all. Surveys of relationships typically ask whether a woman in a relationship what? Aren't you supposed to be like a grand author? You can't finish this sentence. And whether she is happy, because all we collectively care about is getting women into relationships with men. Golly, I wonder what the source is for that. It's another one of her articles. All of her resources are links to other articles that she has written. Interesting that. I maintain, and both my experience and the little available data support this notion, that relationships with men remain the single most dangerous thing most women can do. How much money we want to bet it links back to her own article. Yep, no one saw that coming. Women deserve to know that they are not alone and that negative experiences are the norm. They deserve to know the risk they take when they commit to relationships with men. This survey is my attempt at showing what relationships with men are really like and what the cumulative effect of these relationships often is. On average, women reported having been abused by 12 men over the course of their lives. This is a crisis. It's a pretty serious claim. So far, I'm not seeing any data, no graphs, no explanation of how we came to this. This is not, this doesn't look scientific whatsoever. Well, let's see what she claims she did. Classic, tried and true. This survey involved hours upon hours of work. Oh, okay. So never mind. We should just believe it because as usual, it did hours and hours of work. So that's credible. Oh, so we never actually see the data at all. She just, once again, tries to sell us stickers and then tells us to pay if we want to actually see how she, quote unquote, collected this data. This is pretty wild to come online and tell people that almost every single man exploits and abuses women, that even having a relationship with a man puts you at the highest possible danger of absolutely anything you could ever do in your entire life. And the source is, I did hours and hours of work, please pay me. God, I actually am tempted to subscribe just to see if this is actually a legitimate thing. You know what? Okay, out of morbid curiosity, I spent the $8 we're in. Let's see how she obtained this information. The survey included more than 6,000 participants, all of whom said they identify as women. As with all surveys, scientific and non-scientific, I did not verify this identity in any particular way. As with all surveys, whether they're actually valid or not, I did literally nothing to validate my methods, so you can count on me. I recruited participants via my Substack, Facebook, and other social media pages. Oh, brother. Every once in a while, I conduct a little poll from my audience on, Instagram stories and stuff, and I recognize immediately that that is not a valid poll, no matter what the numbers come out to be, to represent any by and large wide audience. I recognize that my own audience is niche, is in a lot of ways biased, because they all come to my page for similar reasons. If you ever in your life want to conduct an actual legitimate poll, you have to get out there way outside of your own bubble, way outside of your own biased social circle, if you want any actual valid results. Like, I would never take an Instagram poll that I've done, despite the fact that many of them do get upwards of 6,000 or more participants and results, and ever try to push that, especially to vulnerable groups of people, such as women who are concerned about abusers or domestic violence, and then get them to give me money for this information to either validate or invalidate how they are feeling in a way that is not even remotely scientific. You're pushing something as fact when it is just a biased internet poll. This suggests participants are more educated about feminism and about healthy relationships than members of the general population. No, it doesn't. Nothing about the fact that you didn't validate anyone's identity in any way. Simply the fact that they read your shit doesn't tell me anything about their knowledge of feminism or healthy relationships. Dude, that's like me saying, oh, well, I conducted a poll with people on Am I the A-hole subreddit, so this clearly means that they know the most about appropriate social behavior. These are chronically online, very likely single, angry women. I would not say healthy relationships is at the top of their forte. Oh my god. People could share the survey with friends, and I did not control or limit who could participate. AKA, I did not put up any guardrails as to who is simply trolling me or not. I took absolutely no measure of ensuring that anyone is even remotely who they claim to be. So that's how you know it's real. I used 4 distinct collectors for this survey. The details on each and the share of the total are as follows. Liberating Motherhood Group, that's her own page. This is my private support group for paid subscribers. Substack feed, Substack newsletter, and social media feeds. So again, she just got randos off of her own social media. The limitations of this survey, like all of it, the whole thing is incredibly limited because of how unprofessional it has been conducted, but let's hear what she has to say about it. This is not a scientific survey, clearly. That does not mean it is not worthwhile. In fact, I argue that scientific research on this topic falls far, far short, asking only a few perfunctory questions rather than delving deeply into women's lived realities. This is just absolute hogwash. There have literally been so many in-depth studies that have been conducted by universities, institutes, widely accredited organizations that dive into so many different wealth classes, cultures, areas around the world that have taken years to conduct. And she's got the freaking audacity to come up on here and be like, well, I think my Substack article is more in depth, actually. I think I did it the best. Holy shit, the delusion that all of these people are falling for. This is why so many of us are just walking away from feminism, by the way, because if this is your average feminist, I don't want it. I do not want to be within 10 feet of it. No. It also skews strongly in 2 directions. People with strong feminist principles and strong feminist relationships, and people who are currently in abusive relationships. I can't be sure how this might have skewed the results or whether it did. What I can say is that the responses across all of my surveys have been remarkably consistent, suggesting that the results are valid, or at least meaningful. I don't know. I think that my audience is really cool, so it must mean I'm right. This is the 7th survey I've conducted. Wow, 7! Step aside, Harvard and Oxford. We've got a real intelligent wizard in the house. And one thing continues to stick out for me. People's behavior when completing these surveys is absolutely unhinged. So the people completing these surveys are unhinged, yet we are supposed to take their self-reported data as gospel truth. Got it. I don't think this is so much about survey research as it is about people. People do weird things for weird reasons that often follows no consistent pattern. You just said that all of your surveys are consistent. So is your audience trustworthy educated and consistent, or unhinged and inconsistent, because you've just told me that it's both. Holy shit. I'm about to crash out. I'm about to rage quit. Worst $8 I've ever spent, chat. For example, halfway through the survey, I was inundated with complaints, and in some cases, threats from child-free women. High to normal, non-insane child-free women. I love you, this is not about you. There are monsters in every group, and a lot of the monsters in your group seem to want to talk to me. They were extremely upset that I asked questions about children, and that I asked child-free people in the instructions to skip these questions. Many said that rather than skipping the questions about whether men had ever abused their children, they answered no to this question. This could potentially skew the data to make the children look less common than it actually is. And that complaint is actually completely valid. If you're making everyone answer the same questions, whether or not it applies to them, yes, it's absolutely going to skew the data. And these monsters whose complaints you're inundated with, oh, poor you, being annoyed by very valid criticisms, are making remarkably good points that really address how bad you are at this. My survey was also brigaded at one point by incels, which further skewed the data in favor of men appearing better than they actually are. But since you didn't vet anybody within the survey, how do you know whether or not your survey was brigaded by incels or brigaded by femcells? You don't. You actually have no idea. You just noticed a spike in answers that you didn't want to see, and so you drew the most bad faith conclusion you possibly could have, again, without knowing anything about anyone answering these questions, meaning you have no idea what their celibacy status is or isn't. So her findings were very startling. She states that 73% of women reported experiencing at least one form of physical violence. Lots reported pushing, shoving, attempts to strangle. 81% of respondents reported experiencing at least one form of sexual violence at the hands of a romantic partner. You can pause to read the full findings. Emotional abuse section says that 94% of women reported that they had been emotionally abused in a relationship. And these are pretty jarring numbers, but they're also dramatically higher than what we see in larger, peer-reviewed, national studies conducted by far more credible institutions. And the discrepancies between the data she allegedly collected and the data collected by the National Intimate Partner Sexual Violence Survey and the World Health Organization are pretty significant. While Zawn claims that 90% of women reported men begging for sex or implying that they're owed it, peer-reviewed data says it's closer to 10%. Zawn claims that 40% of women claim that a man has strangled them. Peer-reviewed research says it's closer to 1 to 2%. 12% of Zawn's audience claim that their partner is a pedophile. However, peer-reviewed research says that it's less than 0.01%. 54% of Zawn's audience claim that a man has threatened unaliving in order to control them. However, women reporting threatening unaliving to control them is closer to 4 to 7% based on peer-reviewed data. And an alarming 71% of Zawn's audience report a man has driven dangerously or engaged in road rage, whereas peer-reviewed data states that women actually report that it is closer to 8 to 11%. These numbers aren't just like slightly higher. These are 2 to 20 times higher than actual credentialed, trusted research. Importantly, Zawn does not conduct a similar experiment where she at all asks men their experiences with abuse. Mind you, the entire point of her articles was to examine whether or not one group of people was even willing to look inwardly at their own group. Ironically, I'm not seeing Zawn do much self-examination of women. She simply seems to offload all of the abuse blame onto male perpetrators, almost entirely denying that female perpetrators and male victims even exist. And if they do, well, it's inconsequential because it's not as bad. And that's just one of her 7 surveys. When you look at the rest, it goes about the same way. She basically just asks her social media following what they think. Here's another one, and would you like to know how it's conducted? Oh yeah, she just asks her audience again. Mind you, this is after guilt-tripping the people who aren't paying $8 a month by telling them, data collection for this survey was a massive undertaking involving significant work and research. Compiling the data involved even more research. Lady, you just put up like a Google Doc and had them answer questions. It's just, the hours and hours that you claim you put into it was probably just waiting for people to respond. This is a self-selected sample, meaning she reached into the pool of her own audience, people who are already biased and oriented around thinking the same way that she does. This is not an accurate representation of women in general or at large. She didn't even try to reach out to opposing groups or different mindsets. When she did receive opposing mindsets, she just lazily labeled them as incels and probably took their vote completely out of the polling. There was no verification, no controls. The leading framing and motivated participation leads to classic selection bias. She admitted there were data integrity issues. And I find it very fascinating that she is so opposed to incel culture, because what she is doing right here, which is spreading misinformation, exaggerating facts, demonizing entire groups of people, and sowing the seeds of normalizing fear and hopelessness, is literally exactly what the worst of incel groups do. And I agree that a lot of major research attempts on this topic may and probably do include underreporting issues, but you, a completely uncredentialed, random live journal-like writer on the internet, adding on to it is not helping. You can't overcorrect underreporting by massively overreporting in completely unverifiable methods. And this is what I mean when I said that people like her are shooting the entire movement right in the foot, because they're handing ammunition to anti-feminists who already believe that you are hysterical and dishonest. It kills the credibility of the movement, because when people see how much you are grossly exaggerating and misrepresenting what people actually experience in real life, why would they believe anything else you have to say? You're muddying the definitions of abuse. You're derailing how seriously people take actual crimes, and all this fear-mongering and trying to paint men as monsters and trying to basically sell women on this idea that almost every man they come across will undoubtedly harm them makes me think that you care a lot less about actually protecting women and keeping them safe and healthy, and more about encouraging gender essentialism. You know, men bad! You're using survivors as a political football to try and get more clicks and subscriptions instead of offering them actual research and actual resources. I've got to wrap this video up because, first of all, I need my $8 back, and second of all, my cortisol levels are absolutely spiking. But Zawn, I mean, you really tried. You really tried to make this epic point about how horrible fathers' rights groups are because they frame all women as bad and they provide so much misinformation, but I hope this holds up a mirror to you how much you are projecting onto other groups. Zawn, your platform is the one painting 50% of the global population as monsters, fear-mongering, striking hopelessness into the hearts of women everywhere in hopes that you will be able to gather $8 more a month based off of their vulnerability and their own negative experiences. Your survey isn't proof that abuse is the normal state of heterosexual relationships, or that being in a relationship with a man is the most dangerous thing you can do. And those experiences matter, but when you take self-selected, methodologically shaky at best research and then present it as a universal truth, you're not helping feminism, you're weakening it. Because if your worldview was so airtight, you would not need exaggerated numbers to make its case. Real peer-reviewed data already shows us that abuse is a problem, for both men and women. Exaggerating those numbers and trying to convince women that they have no shot in the world of ever having a healthy relationship with men not only completely erases male victims, first of all, but it really doesn't do much to empower women. It just makes them feel completely hopeless. If you actually cared about women's safety, like I do, then you should also care about credibility. It also terrifies me that this woman is trying to build an audience of mostly mothers, because, as I mentioned earlier, children thrive and have the best possible advantages when they have healthy, meaningful relationships with both parents. When we are teaching mothers to paint all men and all fathers under this brush of being abusive monsters, that's gonna alienate the children, gonna damage the parent-child relationship, and God forbid one of the children is a son. These radical feminists who seem to only care about women in the world don't understand how much damage it does when sons grow up thinking that everything they do is and will always be wrong and shameful and damaging. When you force every man to wear the mantle of every one of the worst possible men who has ever existed before him. I'm just gonna say it, these people are freaking quacks. They do not deserve their audiences. They do not deserve to be seen as trustworthy in any way. These people are predatory. They are preying on your vulnerabilities. They are trying to shock you and scare you and create this fantastical boogeyman of an enemy in the form of men to get your $8 a month. So if you want us to be critical of any group that paints an entire population of people as monsters, who exaggerates data and facts and spreads misinformation, we'll do it. Just know that you're going to come crumbling down with them. Anyway, that has been my video for today. If you liked it, show me that you liked it. Push the button. It helps a lot. If you want to see more from my channel, definitely hit subscribe. I have a lot more videos just like this one. I also go live every Monday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you want even more Dadvocate content, feel free to join my YouTube membership or Patreon membership. Those come with bi-weekly ad-free members-only lives, the entire backlog of former Ghosts of Lives past, access to the Discord, and the Patreon comes with merch. But that's enough for me. Remember, stay skeptical, call out the bad guys, and stay safe out there. Okay, bye.